Britain in the 1950s carried two faces. One was tired, rationed, rebuilding brick by brick. The other never stopped being magnificent. In quiet workshops scattered across England, coach builders and engineers were still creating cars of extraordinary luxury, cars built for people who measured quality differently. Rolls-Royce was the name everyone reached for, the obvious symbol of British excellence, the benchmark nobody questioned. But obvious is rarely the whole story. Today we count down 10 of the most luxurious British cars of the 1950s. And number 1, quietly, without ever needing to announce it, beat Rolls-Royce at its own game. Let us begin. Number 10. The Riley Pathfinder, 1953 to 1957, Riley Motors. The Riley Pathfinder looked unassuming from the outside, modest even, until you opened the door. The dashboard was a continuous sweep of polished burr walnut, stretching uninterrupted from one door to the other, a genuine rarity at this price point. The 2.5-liter engine produced over 100 horsepower, shared in modified form with the Riley RM sports cars that had won at Le Mans. This was not a borrowed badge. It was genuine racing pedigree, quietly fitted beneath a gentleman's saloon. One Pathfinder owner, a Surrey solicitor, kept meticulous records of his car for 11 years. Not a single major repair. He wrote to Riley personally to thank them. The company, by then, had already been absorbed into BMC. Nobody ever replied. But the car kept running regardless. Number 9. The Wolseley 6/90, 1954 to 1959, Wolseley Motors. The Wolseley 6/90 became, almost by accident, one of the most photographed cars in Britain because every police force in the country seemed to own one. The illuminated Wolseley badge on the bonnet, glowing faintly at night, became so associated with authority that criminals reportedly learned to recognize it from considerable distance. Senior detectives were issued 6090s as unmarked vehicles, and several reportedly tried to purchase their own once retired. One former Scotland Yard inspector did exactly that in 1960. He kept the car for the rest of his life, said it was the only thing from the job he genuinely missed. Number 8. The Armstrong Siddeley Star Sapphire, 1958 to 1960. Armstrong Siddeley's engineering division had spent the previous decade building jet engines for the Royal Air Force. The Star Sapphire was, in many ways, the result of that knowledge arriving in a road car. A 4.0-liter six-cylinder engine built to aviation tolerances most car manufacturers never approached. The pre-selected gearbox allowed the driver to select the next gear in advance, the change itself requiring only a light touch of the clutch. No wrestling, no missed shifts. One motoring journalist of the era described changing gear in a Star Sapphire as the closest a road car has come to flying without leaving the ground. Several owners who had previously run Rolls-Royces switched permanently, not because the Armstrong Siddeley was more prestigious, it wasn't, but because, as one owner put it in a letter to a motoring magazine, prestige gets you noticed, this gets you home rested. Number 7. The Daimler Conquest Century, 1954 to 1958. The Daimler name had been associated with British royalty since 1900. The Conquest Century carried that weight, but wore it lightly. A 2.4-liter six-cylinder engine, genuinely quick for a car of this class. What made the Century remarkable was its proportion, not the largest Daimler, not the most powerful, but the one that felt more than any other designed around an actual human being. The steering wheel was small and precisely angled, the dashboard close enough to feel intimate rather than imposing. One London doctor purchased a Conquest Century in 1955, specifically because it fit through narrow city streets that larger luxury cars could not navigate. He used it for house calls for the next decade. Patients reportedly recognized the distinctive engine note before they saw the car. Number 6. The Jaguar Mark VIII, 1956 to 1959. Jaguar. William Lyons had a simple rule for everything Jaguar built. It must look as good standing still as it does moving. The Mark VIII honored that rule completely. A one-piece curved windscreen, genuinely advanced engineering for 1956, when most manufacturers still used split screens. A 3.4-liter six-cylinder engine derived directly from Jaguar's racing program. The same engine family that had already won Le Mans 3 times by 1956. Inside, a vast expanse of polished walnut. Deep leather seats shaped more like armchairs than car seats. The Mark VIII outsold every other car in this list combined. Over 28,000 were built, proof that genuine luxury, priced correctly, could reach further than anyone expected. Number 5. The Humber Imperial, 1956 to 1958. Humber. The Humber Imperial existed for one specific purpose: to make the person in the back seat feel like the only person who mattered. A division window separated driver from passengers entirely, a genuine limousine experience in a car most people assumed was simply a large saloon. The 4.1-liter six-cylinder engine was tuned for smoothness rather than speed. Acceleration was never the point. The rear compartment featured reading lamps, fold-down tables, and enough legroom that passengers could cross their legs without adjustment. Several Commonwealth diplomats specifically requested Humber Imperials for official duties in the late 1950s, finding them more discreet than a Rolls-Royce while offering nearly identical comfort. One high commissioner reportedly told his staff, "Arrive in a Rolls and people expect something from you. Arrive in a Humber and they simply listen." Number 4. The Alvis TD21, 1958 to 1963. Alvis. Alvis never advertised in the conventional sense. They didn't need to. The TD21 was bodied by Park Ward, the same coach builder responsible for some of Rolls-Royce's most celebrated designs, which meant Alvis customers were, quite literally, receiving Rolls-Royce-level coachwork at a fraction of the badge price. A 3.0-liter straight six, smooth and unhurried. The interior was entirely hand-finished, leather selected and stitched by craftsmen who also worked on Rolls-Royce and Bentley commissions. Word of mouth alone sustained Alvis production for years. One car dealer in Coventry sold 11 TD21s in 1959, every single one to a customer referred by a previous owner. He never placed a single newspaper advertisement. He never needed to. Number 3. The Bentley S1, from 1955 to 1959. The Bentley S1 and the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud were mechanically almost identical. Same chassis, same 4.9-liter engine, same factory. But Bentley buyers insisted, quietly and consistently, that something was different. The S1 was tuned with slightly sharper throttle response, the steering set up with marginally more feedback. Small differences, but differences that mattered enormously to people who actually enjoyed driving rather than being driven. One motoring journalist conducted a blind test in 1957, driving both cars back-to-back without knowing which was which. He correctly identified the Bentley every time. When asked how, he simply said, "It feels like the car wants to go somewhere. The Rolls feels like it's already arrived." Number 2. The Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 1, 1955 to 1958. Of course Rolls-Royce belongs on this list. It earned every inch of its reputation. The Silver Cloud's interior was extraordinary by any measure ever applied to a motor car. Matched walnut veneers, the grain flowing continuously from panel to panel. Hand-stitched leather throughout, sourced from hides selected for their absence of blemishes. A rear compartment offering fold-down picnic tables, reading lights, and total acoustic isolation from the world outside. Every component engineered to function flawlessly for decades. And many Silver Clouds still do, 70 years later. The Silver Cloud represented 50 years of accumulated expertise. It was, without exaggeration, one of the finest cars ever built anywhere in the world. But in 1956, magnificent as it was no longer entirely alone at the top. Number 1. The Daimler DE36, 1946 to 1953. Daimler. And here we are. Number 1. The car that beat Rolls-Royce. Not by competing with it, by existing in a category Rolls-Royce could not reach. The Daimler DE36 was built for royalty, literally. King George VI rode in one. The Queen used them for state occasions. Foreign heads of state were received in them. At over 21 feet long, powered by a straight 8 engine of 5.5 liters, the DE36 was not simply a luxury car. It was a moving room of state. Each body was constructed individually by hand. No two were identical. Some featured fold-down writing desks. Some carried crystal decanters in fitted cabinets. Some were equipped with special communications equipment for government use. The rear compartment was designed not for relaxation, but for governance, for the quiet, unhurried conduct of affairs that shaped nations. Rolls-Royce built for successful people. The Daimler DE36 was built for consequential ones. There is a difference, and everyone who ever saw one understood it immediately. Many contemporary owners and observers believed the DE36 occupied a category entirely above Rolls-Royce. Not because Rolls-Royce was inferior, but because the DE36 was never in competition with it. It simply existed at a level where comparison felt unnecessary. Rolls-Royce built to the highest standard money could buy. Daimler built to the standard that history required. And history has always demanded more. 10 cars. 10 different definitions of British luxury. Riley believed it meant racing pedigree, hidden beneath restraint. Wolseley believed it meant trust, even from those who chased criminals in it. Armstrong Siddeley believed it meant effortlessness borrowed from the sky. Daimler believed it meant intimacy, not scale. Jaguar believed it meant beauty that worked just as hard as it looked. Humber believed it meant making someone else feel important. Alvis believed it meant never needing to ask twice. Bentley believed it meant wanting to go somewhere. Rolls-Royce believed it meant permanence, perfected over 50 years. And Vandenplas believed something simpler and harder to achieve, that excellence has a ceiling, but care does not. Subscribe, because there is plenty more history worth remembering.